Hey, we're at Baltimore Comic Con 2018. I'm with Phillip Kennedy Johnson talking Low Road West, new series from Boom Studios. First, always easiest question is describe the series for us, because it's a nice twist of a genre.
It is. So it basically follows a group of American teenage refugees who are trying to escape the East Coast because it's being invaded and bombed. And they get stranded in the Oklahoma Dust Bowl in a really mysterious ghost town where they find a doorway to another world.
So the series to me really stands out in that, I read that first issue, fully expecting to be some like apocalyptic story. You've done it, kind of similar stuff, Warlords of Appalachia being one of them. And then there was a hell of a twist, and I kind of went through it and walked through that door with the rest of them. And it feels like you kind of did that focus, like did that on purpose of taking that reader, expecting one thing, and then getting that moment and having that rabbit hole of an experience, just like the kids in it. So when putting together the story in that first issue, I mean, that had to be something that you're purposely doing.
Yes, for sure. I guess the point at which the whole story began for me was the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. That was kind of the kernel of the idea that everything else kind of grew out of. But I didn't want to just do, there's so many great examples of fantasy, of YA fantasy, so many great examples of post-apocalyptic literature, and I really wanted something that would subvert those genres, we started from a place of what if we had American refugees now instead of the English refugees of World War II, and put them in this crazy setting. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to mash up a bunch of genres and just really surprise the reader over and over, and have them realize they don't know what's going to happen.
So you're kind of doing a fantasy series now. I mean, it's a little twist to it, but there's fantasy aspect. Warlords, which was the series you did before this for Boom, was more towards sci-fi. Last Son's little bit sci-fi, but kind of more grounded, I would say, in a way. We talked about this a little bit, is that there's clearly like a theme going throughout all of these, and they kind of feel like they kind of are put together. Boom's done this before with a couple other series that they've published. When designing this one, how much is on your mind as a creator of kind of doing that experience of having three series that kind of thematically work together, that kind of feel like they're continuations of each other in a way, but are totally different stories?
Yeah, that's definitely what we were going for. We kind of wanted to pay off the reader who supported us through Last Sons of America, and then we gave them Warlords, which had similar socio-political themes, dealt with real life, current event issues, also dealt with family in some big way. It kind of had a family at the heart of it. Last Sons was about two brothers, Warlords about a man and his son, and now this one is about a kind of a surrogate family of people who all have lost their families and become a family themselves. That's, again, so all those themes that carry from, like you said, they carry from one story to the next as like spiritual successors, not sequels so much. But yeah, we did want to give, they are kind of companion pieces to give the readers who appreciated the first two stories something else along, in the same vein.
So with all the series that you've done so far, there's been a kind of an impressive thing to me in that there's clearly like a world to them. The characters are really fleshed out. There's maybe small details in there that feel like someone's putting together stuff. Putting really thought into it. The worlds are different than our own. There's clearly socio-political, economic things going on. There's depth to them, and so at times they're hinted at, or someone will say something that kind of hints at something, but it isn't the story, if that makes sense. And the thing that I kind of equated to all two is Dungeon Master building out that world for their game. You might not know everything, you might not touch upon it, but it allows them to tell the story better and to drive you through it. For you as a creator, how much are you putting into world building of these characters and the country and the situation and everything?
A lot.
Yeah. It's clear.
Of all the of the words that the readers see on the page, there are many more words that they don't read that kind of inform the text actually shows up in the book. It's important to me to make all the characters seem really real, that they're in a very real world. This first issue does not deal a whole lot with the events that they're escaping. They there are these cryptic references to Tommy Tango or Tommies about a war happening, about bombings, but there's not a ton of. There's never the.
It doesn't lay out exactly what's
Yeah, you want to try to. I feel like as a writer, you always want to avoid as much as you can of the exposition dump. You don't want to be like, monologue. Here's everything that's happening to get you caught up. You want the character to be just dropped into that world. Sorry, excuse me. You want the reader to be dropped into that world with the characters, and figure out what's going on as they go, rather than have the big introduction that they have to read first.
Well, it's a thing that stand out about your work is you've got this depth of this world, and as you said, you don't lay it all out there. There's clearly in every series you've done, you've maybe touched upon things, but you've never done a dump where you've just explained everything. When this one continues that, and I think it's really interesting, is that you use the characters, the kids, to explain what's going on, and you never quite explain what's going on, which is smart. But there's, I can't think of the names. I'm horrible at that sort of stuff. But like you've got the one kid who's clearly like upper class privilege, and he's making comments about the other kid who's clearly of a background, ethnicity, religion, or something of whoever Tommy Tango is. And he is like needling that kid of kind of like, oh, maybe you're a terrorist or whatever, like making those sort of jabs. So clearly you're hinting at what has happened in that greater story without ever delivering exactly what it is, and it really allows the reader to pick up on that. So when coming up with the series and you're writing, how much do you kind of think about that and focusing in and giving those details without like spilling everything? Because I mean it's a lot of small little hints as to what's going on without actually telling us what's going on.
Yeah, it's very important to me that the reader like almost like feel what's happening rather than actually reading it. Like right. I want the information to come organically and get parsed out. Like if I could make a gaming analogy, like the game Limbo, that's a brilliant game with like no text or speech or anything, and just drops you in. You wake up in the woods in the dark, and you don't know who the kid is or where you are or what happens, and throughout that game, you kind of piece it together. To me that's like the kind of the ideal storytelling scenario where you find out as you go. You wake up and you're lost, or like the movie Dark City where the guy wakes up in the bathtub like, whoa, where am I? Now, there's actually a voiceover at the beginning of that movie that I never let my friends watch. Like whenever we're watching Dark City, we're like, okay, don't turn on the audio until
versions that cut that audio. They don't have that.
Yeah, I heard that. I actually don't have that, but yeah, I feel like it's really important not to have that. Like you want them to start out lost, and as they go, they figure out what's happening, because these kids are not much better off.
The kids, I think, is like obviously key to the series. I mean, it's what it revolves around. And the thing that really sticks out to me is that they feel like kids. It's not like I'm around kids those age. I couldn't tell you specifically if they're acting right. For you as a writer, like how important it is to get that voice to make sure you're getting your characters right. Because a lot of writers, they might have kids, but they sound like adults, just miniature adults. But is that something that's kind of on your mind, you're focused on, work on?
Oh my God, that was like the biggest thing. Yeah.
Front and center.
It's so important to not be condescending as you write these kids. You don't want them to sound like like small children. You don't want them to sound super annoying like some writers sometimes do. Yep. You can't have them sound like adults that already have everything figured out. They really need to sound like they are. And I'm kind of lucky in that I teach trumpet to some kids around that age. So I would have some of them read my work and be like, hey, if you're willing, I'd like you to read this comic and tell me if anything jumps out at you as sounding too old or too young or too weird. Like if I'm nailing the language. And that was invaluable to have students tell me like, yeah, here's what we think about how you wrote us. And also I'd have like the children of colleagues and that kind of thing. It was a really important step.
With the series, you obviously it's clear things are fleshed out. You've got tons of background. Have you actually ever thought about releasing this stuff? I love reading extras like that. I think it's always really interesting to kind of dive into the worlds more. I know you have the material, but one, have you thought about releasing it? Two, what the hell do we got to do to make you to release this stuff?
Hey, buy my book, man. If you want to see the backstory, I would love to put it out. Like I've got in my other books too, like especially Warlords, I had like books of gospel, like of the Waterborn that have yet to be released. I would love to put that out. We use excerpts from the Book of Luther in Warlords. That book is done. This is as complete as the Book of Jeremiah. So I would love to put that out. I have songs that appear in that series. Like there were a lot of excerpts from political speeches and things in the front of each issue. I mean those interviews and speeches are all fully written. There's stuff like that in this too. There are a series of journals in Low Road West that are very important to that story, and I would love to put out a lot of that too. I don't want to use too much of those journals in this comic,
Right.
Because just don't want to be too self-indulgent that way. But yeah, they're there. So I mean, my some of them even have like little sketches that the artist or that the author drew. Like mine are childish scrawl, but.
So what I'm hearing is we need to do the petition and get you to get you to do that. All right, so that's my out here challenge. I'm good with that. So you're writing tons of stuff right now. You've got Low Road West. You're doing some Jim Henson stuff, other creator-owned stuff. The thing that's kind of stand out is that even though you might have kind of like a world, not really a world, but these three series, Last Sons, Warlords, now this is thematically tied together. You're also doing fantasy stuff with Jim Henson, more kids-related things. You've got Smoketown, which is like noir detective, is kind of a good way of describing it. You had your web series with submarine. I'm totally blanking on
the Lost Boys of the U-Boat Bremen.
Yeah, that's right. You've really kind of bounced around and done tons of different genres. There's a lot of writers who will either just kind of drop into their like niche and that's what they do, or there's some that kind of like doing all sorts of stuff. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. For you as a writer, clearly you seem to enjoy doing varied things. Do you see advantages of that? Do you really enjoy that? What are your thoughts of being able to kind of dip your toes into so many different properties and concepts and genres?
And for me, it's crucial. I mean, I've always admired how diverse Neil Gaiman's body of work is. He's got, obviously comics, film and TV work. It's all, great. His prose novels are great. He's got like proper children's books, like that are not scary, other ones that are scarier. I love how he does not let himself be pigeonholed. I've always admired that a lot, and I try to do the same thing. I actually am working on a kid's book now for my own son called the Moon Dragon. I'm really excited to put out with Dustin Mollick, my colleague from Smoketown and from the musicomic.com stuff. Some other work, but yeah, it's been really important for me. I know people who read my Boom work, my creator-owned Boom work, might think like, oh, this is the guy that does, political stuff, dressed up in sci-fi genre.
Clearly not all you do.
Yeah, that is what I do for those books, but I do have other work here and also other work at other places, and I do try not to let myself be pigeonholed, and it's like a guiding light of what I'm doing as a writer.
Yeah. With the series you've done, obviously they are neck deep in socio-political stuff, economic stuff. How much, and some of them take on some really important issues. This is about refugees in the end. That's kind of like the underlying theme to it. For you as a creator, like how important is it to get those issues right and kind of do them justice?
Well, it's super important. I mean, it's very important to get it right, to do those issues justice, but not at the expense of the story, if that makes sense. Like I don't want the okay. Low Road West is in a way, it's about refugees. It's not necessarily completely about the refugee crisis.
Right.
It's about a bunch of kids who, as their world falls apart, they find a doorway to a new one. And of course there are overtones there for what it's like for refugees. But I try not to beat the reader to death with it, where the story itself suffers. Like the story needs to be the story. And not just a vehicle for some hidden message, if that makes sense. Like I have things I want to communicate, but not at the expense of the story, or not to an extent that it defines who the characters are.
It's a theme and part of the story, but it's not the driver of the story.
Yes.
So for you writing, like you obviously kind of like bounce around doing a whole bunch of different things. Do you find it difficult at a time to switch gears? Because I mean, you're doing multiple series at once, and God knows how many projects, I've lost count at how many projects you've got going on. It's got to be a little difficult to be like, hey, I'm going from a story about refugees to Dark Crystal.
It can be, yeah. I mean, it can be a little jarring to go from writing, Gelfling speak or like, Aughra stuff, and then, now I'm going to do some body horror.
Yeah. Oh, I'm doing this like, here's this thing and this horror thing, and then, cute little things. Like, it's got to be there's got to be jarring. Like,
yeah, it can be refreshing too. Like if you're kind of beating your head against a wall in a certain book, I'm like, I'm going to write some cartoon characters now, and then I'm going to come back to this, and we're going to figure out how we're going to get this guy's brains all over so-and-so.
So has there been any instances where you've come up with a concept while doing one series and then thrown that into another one, like it didn't work, so like maybe you're doing a Dark Crystal thing and be like, oh, this would be really cool, I can't do this in Dark Crystal, but I can totally do it in this other series that's like completely different to it?
I recycle ideas all the time. There's been like some little, or I'll hear a story or something will happen like right in front of me. Yeah. It's a line of dialogue that's like, oh my God, there's no way I'm not going to write that in somewhere, like I've got to share this with people, but it won't work in this. It's like, or I'll try it in one story and it won't work, and be like, well, now just for reasons of, we might have to just cut the story shorter. Now there's no room now for this conversation, so we'll cut it. We'll use it again, in another story. So yeah, it happens kind of a lot.
With the series, what are kind of the influences for Low Road West? I mean, obviously it starts off with the apocalypse. It kind of turns into this fantasy. Lion Witch and the Wardrobe is the first thing that comes to mind for me. But like, what are some of the other influences that went into it?
Oh man, well, influences in Low Road West specifically are J.J. Abrams and Darren Lindelof's Lost. Right. Stranger Things for sure. I mean, C.S. Lewis obviously in a big way. Those are the big ones that come to mind for now. But like as far as fantasy stuff in general, kind of the heavies that everyone knows. Not a lot of obscure influences for my fantasy right now. I do read the Silmarillion a lot, and it's not as fun a read, say, as The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings. It's dense, but
world building one.
Yeah, for world building, it's unmatched. And actually, I'm studying conlang a lot, and like just the structuring of languages, and that's helping me a lot with various fantasy writing that I'm doing, both in Low Road West and also other properties.
With the series, for Boom, you've done a lot of miniseries. In general, I think you've done a lot of miniseries. Yeah. Obviously Boom has kind of been geared towards miniseries a lot. And some of them are maxi series, some are 12, some are 4 and 6. For you as a writer, like how is it easier to write, like knowing you have this many issues that you've kind of got a definitive story and definitive size to like tell it in?
Yeah, I think making it concise is really important. If it was an open-ended story where I had an endless number of issues, I feel like the story wouldn't be as tight. I mean, not to say that writers have not done amazing work like that. I personally tend to see my stories in terms of kind of film length rather than a season of TV. Like I tend to think of a story in terms of an arc that is pretty tight, but with the door open at the end. So if we can always do another arc that would continue. Like most of my miniseries tend to be a chapter that happens within a much larger world. So we have that chapter, and there's an ending to that chapter, and it could be the ending of the whole story if we want it to be. But as Dr. Manhattan says, nothing ever really ends, and hopefully there'll be opportunities to do more of all these stories.
We've held you for quite a time, and you got fans that you gotta go talk to. Like, what else can you tell us that you got coming out? I mean, you have a lot of projects, and I don't know what you can and can't talk about. What I can and can't talk about, so it's probably best just to ask you. So for those who are watching, want to check out more stuff, and you should really go check out his work, all of it. What can you tell people about? What can we hint them at?
Well, I'm working on, like I said, The Moon Dragon, which is a kid's book I'm doing with Dustin Malik. We're very proud of it. It's not done yet, of course, but it's coming out soon, I hope. I have Planet of the Apes, Time of Man, coming out next month. It comes out on Halloween, I believe. That's with artist Morgan Beam, who is killing it on art, just like hand done watercolors. It looks really beautiful. Can't wait for people to see it. I'm doing a new story with my Kong Gods of Skull Island artist Chad Lewis. A new series that is, you know, just in the very early stages, but his art already looks amazing, and I can't wait to put this thing out. Yeah, we have some really exciting projects. Others I can't name just yet, but hopefully next time.
Cool. Well, we're definitely, keep on talking when that happens. So, as always, appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Hey, thanks for watching the previous video from Graphic Policy Television. Just by watching, you help support our site. Thank you so much. Now, if you're watching these videos, you probably care about geeky things like movies, television, comic books, toys, games, video games, you name it. You can go and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel to stay in touch and catch all the new videos, or check out our website at graphicpolicy.com. There's a nice link on this end of the video. But as always, thank you for watching. Keep on rocking and keep it geeky.